The Bible says, speak to the earth and it shall teach thee. The earth is like a big magnet. Now, magnets always lose their strength. The earth's magnet has lost 10% of its strength in the last 150 years. That means, of course, it used to be stronger since it's getting weaker, and it cannot be more than 25,000 years old. Just the Earth's magnetic field decline limits it to less than 25,000 years, and that also means carbon dating can't work. Give you a few examples here. The lower leg of a mammoth dated 15,000 years old, but the skin was 21,000. One part of a mammoth is 29,000 years old. Another part's 44,000. You talk about a slow birth. Cover more on carbon dating on video number 7 and all the serious problems with that. But the textbooks will say, well, yes, the magnetic field's getting weaker, but that's because it's reversing, okay? It's a pattern of reversals. No, there are no magnetic reversals in the magnetic field at the bottom of the ocean. We cover that on video 6. This is all part of another theory called Pangea. How many have ever heard of Pangea before? That all the continents used to fit together. Well, I bet they didn't tell you they shrank Africa nearly 40% to make them fit, did they? Did they tell you they took out all of Mexico and Central America? Señor, ¿qué pasa? ¿Dónde está Mexico, Panama, Costa Rica, Guatemala? And they don't tell you what I think ought to be obvious to a kindergartner. Did you know, if you take the water out of the oceans, you will notice there is dirt underneath. People say, Hovind, do you think the continents were ever connected? I say, well, what do you mean? They're still connected. I mean, like right now, it's just the low places are full of water, that's all. What do you mean, were they connected? Hello, they're still connected. What a dumb theory. We cover more on that on video number 6 about Pangea, on what's called the Hovind theory. But the Earth is spinning about 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, but the Earth is slowing down. The Earth actually slows down about 1,000th of a second every day. The Earth slows down. Astronomy magazine ran an article in 1992. They said, Earth's rotation is slowing down. June will be 1 second longer than normal. We will have a leap second. Leap second? Yep. They have to have a leap second about every year to year and a half because the Earth is slowing down. Now, kids, this is going to be complicated, so listen carefully. The Earth is spinning, but it is slowing down. So that means that it used to be going faster. How many can figure this out with no help at all? 4, 5, 6, 7, 9. Okay, good. Well, if the Earth is only 6,000 years old, this is not a problem. I mean, it was going a little faster. Adam wouldn't notice. He didn't have a watch anyway, as far as we know. But some of these guys would like me to believe the Earth is billions of years old. Man, if you go back billions of years, you're going to have a problem. The Earth would be spinning pretty quick. Get up, go to bed, get up, go to bed, get up, go to bed. You'd never get nothing done. Centrifugal force would have been enormous. Man, the winds would have been 5,000 miles an hour from the Coriolis effect. And you want me to believe the dinosaurs lived millions of years ago? I know what happened to them. They got blown off. No, they did not live millions of years ago. The Sahara Desert has what's called a prevailing wind pattern. The wind almost always blows the same way. This creates a serious problem. The hot air comes off the desert, kills the trees next door, and that area becomes desert. The process is called desertification. You can read about it in an earth science book. Sahara Desert's been studied very carefully. They did a long study on this and said, you know what, folks, the Sahara Desert is probably about 4,000 years old. That's when it started growing. Egypt used to be fertile land all over the place. Okay, well then I have a question. If the Earth is millions of years old, why don't we have a bigger desert someplace? Why would the biggest desert on the planet be less than 4,000 years old? Well, I have a theory about that. Now here's my theory. I believe about 6,000 years ago, God created everything. 4,400 years ago, there was a flood. Now it's pretty hard to have a desert under a flood. You got to admit that would be tough, okay? So the desert couldn't start growing until the flood water went down. So I predict, based on the Bible, the biggest desert in the world will be less than 4,400 years old. It is. Wow, maybe the Bible's right. You know, when they drill into the ground, sometimes they hit oil. The oil's under incredible pressure in some places, up to 20,000 pounds per square inch. It'll come squirting up out of the ground. like a big zit. 20,000 psi. Well, the guys who study the rocks on top of the oil say, it just can't handle that pressure for more than about 10,000 years. I know the weight of rock supplies pressure, but the pressure in the well is greater than the weight of overburden. They say it should have cracked the rock and leaked off in less than 10,000 years. Okay. Well, then now I've got two questions. Where did the oil come from? And why is it still under pressure? Well, most scientists agree that oil comes from organisms that are squished. They're changed by heat and pressure into oil. They learned in 1971 how to make oil in 20 minutes in the laboratory. In Australia, they've got a treatment plant that takes sewage sludge and turns it into oil in 30 minutes. There's a factory in Turkey that just opened up, a factory in Texas that takes turkey guts and pressurizes them and heats them and turns them into oil. They said in the article, we duplicated what Mother Nature does, but what Mother Nature took millions of years to do, we do in about 30 minutes. Sinclair has the dinosaur as their logo. They say dinosaurs turn to oil. Yes, boys and girls, they mellowed for 80 million years. I don't think so. I have a theory about the oil. Now, here's my theory, okay? I believe about 6,000 years ago, God created everything. 4,400 years ago, there was a flood, okay? In that flood, lots of critters and people drowned. They got buried by the gravel and the rocks and the mud and the sand, and it got pretty heavy after a while, and it squished them into oil. So the oil is down there today from the people and animals that drowned in that flood. Which means if you stop and think about that, you drove over here tonight on some of your ancestors. Well, Noah's uncles anyway. Next time you're at the gas station, pumping them in there, you can say, bye, Grandpa. You should have listened to Noah. He told you it's going to rain. I was preaching in Denver one time, and some guys came and they said, Hovind, we know you teach the earth is only 6,000 years old. We'd like to prove to you you're wrong. Would you come with us, please? I said, sure. They took me to this big freezer in Denver, outside of Denver in Lakewood. It's the National Ice Core Laboratory. 36 below zero in there. They put this big suit on me, big hat, big gloves, big boots. I was freezing in 5 seconds when I walked in there. I got Florida blood, it's real thin. They said, Hovind, we go to Greenland and we drill holes through the ice. Government job. And we take this big pipe, we drill it down in, and we bring this ice core out of the middle of the pipe, and we save it in this big freezer here in Lakewood, Colorado. We have 10 ice cores stored in this freezer. They said, they took me over and showed me one of the ice cores. They said, you see these rings on here? It looks like tree rings, dark, light, dark, light. I said, oh yeah, it's real clear. They said, well, what happens in the summer, the snow melts a little bit, and then it refreezes and makes clear ice. Shows up dark on the picture. In the winter, the snow just packs. It doesn't get a chance to melt. And so it shows up as a white layer. So these layers represent summer, winter, summer, winter, summer, winter, summer, winter. They said, now the deepest hole we've ever drilled is 10,000 feet deep. And we counted these ice rings, and there were 135,000 of them. And now you're going around telling everybody the earth is 6,000 years old. We can prove it's at least 135,000. I said, fellas, aren't you assuming those are annual rings? See, they didn't know about the Lost Squadron, apparently. But in World War II, some airplanes ran out of gas and landed in Greenland. Has anybody ever heard of the Lost Squadron? Okay, it's been on TV a bunch of times. Well, the airplanes got left there in 1942. They went on and fought the war. Everybody forgot about them until a rich millionaire from Kentucky got a brilliant idea. Go find those airplanes and bring them home. He went there looking for the airplanes. They had to use ground-penetrating radar to penetrate the ice, and they located the planes. They melted a hole to get down to a P-38. It was 263 feet below the surface. They melted this hole down to get to the plane, took the plane apart, and brought the pieces back up through the hole and put it back together in Middleborough, Kentucky, not too far from here. How far is Middleborough from Knoxville? 2 hours, maybe? Okay. The planes, that's where its home base is, Middleborough. Well, the planes were in the ice for 48 years. They were 263 feet down. That's 5.5 feet a year. Now, the deepest hole they've ever drilled is 10,000 feet. You divide that by 5.5, you get 1,800 years. I know deeper layers get squished, called glacial firn, so really 4,000 years is plenty of time to put all the ice at the North and South Pole. So why isn't there more ice at the North and South Pole? I visited the museum and saw the guy who dug out the airplane. His name is Bob Cardin. I said, Bob, when you went down to get to that airplane, did you go through ice rings? He said, oh yeah, many hundreds of them. I said, now wait a minute. How can there be hundreds of ice rings in 48 years? Shouldn't there be somewhere around 48? He said, who told you those are annual layers? He said, that doesn't represent summer, winter, summer, winter. It represents warm, cold, warm, cold, warm, cold. You can get 5 of those in 1 week in Knoxville, can't you? Yeah. But here's a guy still calling them annual layers. Now, either he's ignorant or he's lying. I hope he's just ignorant, because ignorance can be fixed. You see, stupid is forever, but ignorance can be fixed. That's the difference, by the way. A guy that works with the Eskimos said, Brother Hovind, I got 15 layers of snow on my car in 8 hours. Not 15 inches, 15 distinct layers of snow. You kids are going to be taught that each of the layers of the earth is a different age. They've got Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, Archaeozoic. Did you know the whole geologic column is baloney? It doesn't exist. We covered that on video 4. All over the world, petrified trees are found standing up, connecting these rock layers. Petrified tree connecting a bunch of layers can't be millions of years difference in the age of those layers. One in Cookeville, Tennessee, not far from here. The bottom is coalified, the center is petrified, the top is coalified again. Runs through 2 coal seams. Cover more on that on video 6 about coal formation. Mount St. Helens blew trees into Spirit Lake. They're going to petrify very quickly, standing up. That's the way they sank to the bottom. They got waterlogged. Wood petrifies quickly. Here's petrified firewood. Here's a petrified fish giving birth. It does not take millions of years to give birth. Petrified cowboy boot with the cowboy's legs still in it. The article's on the table down here called The Limestone Cowboy. The Mississippi River is depositing sediments at the rate of 80,000 tons every hour. 80,000 tons of mud comes down and dumps off around New Orleans, and that delta is growing larger and larger. They studied the delta pretty carefully and say it probably took about 30,000 years to put all that mud out there in the delta. Okay, well then I have a question. If the earth is millions of years old, why isn't the whole Gulf of Mexico full of mud by now? They'll say, Hovind, it's 30,000 years. That proves the Bible's wrong. The Bible says 6,000. I know, but see, I've got a theory about that. Here's my theory. I believe 6,000 years ago, God made everything. 4,400 years ago, there was a flood. As the flood water was running off, whoosh, about half of that mud washed out there in 20 minutes. So it looks like it took 30,000 years to get the mud out there. It took about 20 minutes. And then 4,400 years since then, okay? A friend of mine from Louisiana is a pastor of a church. He said, Brother Hovind, I used to work in the oil field, drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, drilling for oil. He said, we drilled down through 14,000 feet of mud and hit trees 60 feet tall, standing up. 60-foot vertical trees under 14,000 feet of mud. More about that on video 6. Here's a picture of the oldest tree on the planet. It's called the bristlecone pine. We've got a piece of bristlecone in our museum in Pensacola. It's only 30 inches in diameter, and it's 700 years old. You can count the rings with a magnifying glass. It grows real slow. Now, tree ring dating is not an exact science. Trees can produce 2 rings a year or 3 rings a year. Okay? And be very careful about tree ring dating with overlapping sequencing. We cover more on that during Q&A time if you'd like. But the oldest tree in the world, this textbook says, is 4,300 years old. Earth's oldest organism. That's a pretty old tree. But I've got a question. If the earth is millions of years old, why don't we have an older tree someplace? Why would the oldest tree be 4,300 years old? I have a theory about that. Now here's my theory. I believe about 6,000 years ago, God made everything, and 4,400 years ago, there was a flood. And so I predict the oldest tree ought to be somewhere around 4,300 years old. It is. Wow. Maybe that Bible's right, you know? Maybe you ought to read that thing and believe it. Here's a picture of a coral reef. You know, the largest reef in the world's in Australia. I had a call from a church in Brisbane one time. They said, do you want to come preach over here in Australia? I said, I need to pray about this. He said, yes. I took my whole family over to Australia. My daughter and I got to go scuba diving at the Great Barrier Reef. It was incredible. Some of the reef was destroyed during World War II by ships and anchors and bombs and stuff like that. So the environmentalist wackos went out there to see how fast it grows back. They watched the reef grow for 20 years. It was a government project. After watching it grow for 20 years, they said the reef is less than 4,200 years old. Okay, well then I have a question. If the earth is millions of years old, why don't we have a bigger reef someplace? Why on earth would the biggest reef be only 4,200 years old? I have a theory about that. I bet you know what it is, don't you? Can you figure it out by now? Okay. Here's a picture of Niagara Falls. The textbook says, boys and girls, the rocky ledge above Niagara Falls has been eroding for nearly 9,900 years. Now, how do they know that? Well, the rocks are breaking off the edge. I mean, all waterfalls do that. They break rocks off, and the waterfall eats its way backwards, okay? Flows one direction, erodes the other direction. Niagara Falls is moving back 4.7 feet a year. Charles Lyell went there in 1841 and said, well, Niagara Falls is here. Obviously, it started up here at the cliff by Lewiston, New York. It's moving back down the gully. He said it's 10,000 years old worth of erosion. The people that lived there said, Charlie, it erodes a whole lot faster than you think. One good rainstorm and there's a whole lot of erosion takes place. He figured 3 feet a year, purposely to make the Bible look wrong. He hated the Bible. We'll get into more of him on video number 4. Today, Niagara Falls is way back there, split over that island. There's actually 2 Niagara Falls, the Canadian side and the American side. It's eroded back quite a ways just since Charles Lyell's time. The textbook says this gorge that the river runs in, is 7.5 miles long. A simple calculation shows it's been 9,900 years. Oh, it's not that simple. See, Niagara Falls is right here. It started off further north up by Lewiston. If the earth is millions of years old, why hasn't it eroded back to Lake Erie by now? Why is Niagara Falls right there? I have a theory about that, okay? Now here's my theory. You see, about 6,000 years ago, God made everything, and 4,400 years ago, there was a flood. As the flood water was running off, whoosh, about half of that creek washed out in 20 minutes. So it looks like it took 9,900 years. They forgot the flood. They also forgot to get the right number. It should have been 8,400 had they used 4.7, but what do you expect? Okay. When it rains, 30% of the water runs into the ocean, bringing with it mineral salts. The oceans are getting saltier every day. Today, they're 3.6% salt. They could have done that in less than 5,000 years. Question, why aren't the oceans saltier? Well, you see, 6,000 years ago, God made everything. 4,400 years ago, there's a flood. Now, since the flood's been over, the oceans have gradually gotten saltier. One atheist I debated said, Hovind, would you please tell me how the freshwater fish survived the flood? I said, sir, aren't you assuming the flood was salt water? He said, the ocean is salt water. I said, well, it is today, yeah. During the flood, it's probably mostly fresh water, and it's gradually gotten saltier, and today some animals have had to adapt to salt water. And now we have freshwater crocodiles and saltwater crocodiles, and they probably had a common ancestor, a crocodile. He said, that's evolution. I said, no, it's not. Going from a freshwater croc to a saltwater croc is a minor change compared to your evolution story. You believe they changed from a rock to a croc. Now, that's a major change, okay? A friend of mine in Alabama raises fish. He said he took a freshwater fish, black mollies, slowly added salt to their aquarium. In 2 weeks, they became saltwater fish. When he put them back in freshwater, they died in 30 minutes. They can adapt to salt water, not a problem. How many have ever gone into a cave and the guide said, don't touch the formations. They take millions of years to form. They all got the same speech, right? You go over here to, what's the one in Kentucky? Mammoth Cave? Or go to Carlsbad Caverns and they say it took 250 million years. They did a study on these stalactites and one guy said, the fastest they can grow is 2.5 inches per 1,000 years. That's the maximum growth rate. I don't think so. Here are some 50-inch stalactites growing under the Lincoln Memorial. They did that in 40 years. There's a bat covered up with flowstone before it could even rot. There's 2-inch stalactites growing off a refrigeration shed in Pensacola, Florida. There's a guy in a building in Indiana built just 40 years ago, has huge cave formations in the basement of the building from water leaking through the limestone. There's a mine was shut down in Australia for 55 years. When they opened it back up to check it out, there were huge cave formations in 55 years. There's a pipe that was dripping water for 7 years, made a 13-inch stalactite. I thought it was 2.5 inches per 1,000 years. It's more like 2 inches per year. They broke off the stalagmite that was under it and gave it to me. It's in my museum. There's a parking garage built in 1997 in Texas. It was making stalagmites on the students' cars parking under it. They had to put up a drip pan to catch the water. A guy in Wyoming had a hot mineral spring on his property in Thermopolis, Wyoming. So he stuck a pipe in the ground. The water came out the top of the pipe and bubbled out the side of the top of the pipe, you know. But it had a little fountain. They called it the teepee fountain. Well, the guy died. They left the pipe sticking in the yard. As the pipe was there, it left behind mineral deposits as the water evaporated. How many have seen these mineral deposits? You get them on your sink up here? Okay. The guy died, and about 95 years after he died, after the pipe was stuck in the ground, I went to see it. Here it is, back in 1998. That would take some lime away to scrub that thing clean, don't you think? Yeah, a little bit. The guy down the street started his later. It's not quite as big, you know. But, at the current rate of erosion, the continents will erode flat in 14 million years. Why do they tell us we've got fossils that are 300 times older than that, still above sea level? They should have washed out to sea 300 times. All you got to do is fly out west and look at the erosion patterns and say, man, this place was destroyed by a flood. I mean, the whole world was destroyed by a flood. Just fly around like I do and look out the window once in a while. The oldest languages in the world are kind of interesting. Origin of major writing systems from National Geographic. What do they say? Well, they say the oldest writing systems in the world started about 3000 BC. 5,000 years ago. Oldest writing systems. And the oldest languages are modern, sophisticated, and complete. The Chinese said the year 2000 was the year 4700. They think they started their calendar with the flood. They called Noah Fuhai. The oldest recorded capital punishment, 3,800 years ago. The Hebrew calendar said the year 2000 was 5760. We know the Hebrew calendar is messed up because a rabbi purposely took some years out to make it not match the prophecy to fit Jesus. The Saxons had a genealogy going back to Adam. The Danes and Norwegians had a king list going back to Noah. Don't trust the Egyptian king list. That is greatly exaggerated. See the work by Corville on that and Evolution Cruncher. Why are the oldest reliable historical records less than 6,000 years old? Well, I have a theory about that. I bet you know what it is, don't you? Yeah. That Bible is absolutely right, folks. Absolutely correct, scientifically. The evidence for a young earth is overwhelming. The students aren't taught that. Students are only shown the evidence for an old earth. Remember the coins in the box? They better deal with the youngest ones, not the oldest ones. These books aren't really science books anymore. They're books about evolution. I think it's part of a much bigger picture for a new world order. See, the guys that started this country said, behold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain rights. Like, do you have the right to have a church, or does the government create churches? It's the difference between 501c3 and 508c1a. You better study that out. You have the right to get married, or does the government give the right to get married? It's the difference between a marriage license and a marriage covenant. Big difference. Better study that out. But did you know 75% of kids from Christian homes who go to public schools will reject the Christian faith after 1 year of college? That's what happened to Crawford Toy. Most people have never heard of Crawford Toy, but he was a very famous Southern Baptist seminary professor. He almost married a girl named Lottie Moon. Has anybody ever heard of Lottie Moon? You know, you guys have the Lottie Moon offering every Christmas. She was a great missionary to China. Crawford Toy, after the Civil War, went to Europe and learned about evolution. And he sucked it in and believed it. He became an evolutionist. Crawford came back to his Bible class and said, you know, the Bible intends to teach a plain six-day creation. The Bible is simply in error at that point. The Bible's in error. Now, Crawford, hold on. Maybe your theory's in error. Maybe you got brainwashed. It's very easy to get brainwashed. I'm going to try to brainwash the whole crowd, and then we're going to quit and go home. And tomorrow we'll talk about the Garden of Eden. What was that like? Why did they live to be 900? But first I want to try to brainwash everybody. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you a little story. As I tell the story, I will brainwash you. Maybe you've never been brainwashed before. It's a harmless procedure. Don't worry about it, okay? When I'm done telling the story, I will ask you 2 simple questions about the story. If you know the answer, I just want you to raise your hand, okay? If you don't know the answer, it will be because you have been successfully brainwashed. Now pay attention. Here goes the story. Once upon a time, a man left home jogging. He jogged a little ways and turned left. He jogged a little ways and turned left. He jogged a little ways and turned left and jogged back home. As he was jogging home, he noticed 2 masked men waiting for him at home. Who were the masked men, and why did he leave home jogging? If you know, raise your hand, but don't say it out loud. There's about 5 or 6. Ooh, okay, the rest of you, pay attention. We're going to try it again, okay? Once upon a time, a man left home jogging. He jogged a little ways and turned left. I'll give you a hint. That's important. He jogged a little ways and turned left. He jogged a little ways, turned left, and jogged back home. As he was jogging home, he noticed 2 masked men waiting for him at home. Who were the masked men, and why did he leave home jogging? Anybody new figured out? 2 more. Okay. The rest of you, pay attention. We're going to try it one more time. But now I'm going to unbrainwash you. So you didn't realize it, but I had you brainwashed in the first 3 seconds. I'm going to unbrainwash all of you now just by showing you a couple of pictures. I'll tell the same story word for word, but watch the pictures. You will feel yourself get unbrainwashed. It's the coolest feeling. Are you ready? Here goes. Once upon a time, a man left home jogging. He jogged a little ways and turned left. He jogged a little ways and turned left. He jogged a little ways and turned left and jogged back home. As he was jogging home, he noticed 2 masked men waiting for him at home. Who were the masked men? The catcher and the umpire. You say, Brother Hovind, is it that easy to get brainwashed? Oh, yeah. You see, as soon as I said a man left home, you started thinking about a house, and you were off track. And once you get off track, it's pretty tough to get back on. Would you like to see how kids get brainwashed in your school system by the millions every year? Millions of kids in America every single year get brainwashed, and it's so simple how they do it. They put the kid in kindergarten. He can't even read yet. And they give him a book like this. I can read about dinosaurs. Would anybody like to just take a wild guess at what the first sentence in the book says? Millions of years ago. And that kid's being thrown off track in the first 5 seconds. How many kids are being taught that in your town? Like all of them. That's calling Jesus a liar. Did dinosaurs live millions of years ago? Dr. Seuss even says it, millions of years before you were born. Jesus said the creation of Adam was the beginning. Oh, somebody's wrong, folks. Now, wait a minute. The Bible says before the flood came, they lived to be 900 years old. How is that possible? Well, we'll cover that seminar part 2 tomorrow. But what about the flood? Well, that's covered on video number 6. And what about dinosaurs? Well, that's covered on video number 3. But listen, you're going to be told in school you started like a slime and you slowly became a human. You be careful because that philosophy will spoil you. Jesus said, beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit. After the tradition of the world and the rudiments of the world and not after Christ. Hey, if a child goes 12 to 16 years to school in your town, how's he going to view the world? Probably as an evolutionist. Hey, if the Bible's right about the beginning, maybe it's right about the end. Let's summarize here. God made the world. He owns it. He makes the rules, and we are all guilty of breaking His rules. Every one of us. I'll show you. Here's the 10 Commandments. He told us, thou shalt not bear false witness. Don't lie. How many of you have ever told a lie in your life? Put your hand up. Come on. You're doing another one if you don't, okay? All right. Thou shalt not steal. How many ever stole something? Come on, you already told me you're a liar. Put your hand up, okay? Keep your hand go up there, brother. Put it up. Okay. All right, so far we know we're all a bunch of lying thieves, right? Do you want to read the whole list and see how we're doing? We better stop right there. There's no question we are guilty and we are going to be punished. God is a righteous judge. He cannot look upon sin, and we're going to be punished. Or you need to find a substitute. That's where Jesus comes in. He wants to pay for your sins. 36 years ago, I told him he could pay for mine. I asked him to forgive me and save me. Hey, if you died today, where would you go? Smoking or non-smoking? Where are you going when you die? You ought to think about that because you're going to be dead for a really long time. All you get in this life is a little bitty dash between two dates. I'm going to die someday. I'm going to try to make it the last thing I do, but it's going to happen. Hey, it could happen today. Have you seen the way they drive around Knoxville, Tennessee? You have got some certified rednecks out there, folks, and you can get killed on the way home tonight, right? Where are you going when you die? If you're not sure you're saved, why don't you ask the Lord to forgive you and save you? And if you are saved, what on earth are you doing for heaven's sake? Everybody ought to find something to do for the Lord. There's a war going on. Find something to do, okay? Get busy. Win souls. Be a Sunday school teacher, bus driver. Do something for God with your life. If we can help, that's what our materials are for. Catalog on the back table back there, as well as our videos. We want to help strengthen your faith in God's Word.